I always believed family meant loyalty, that no matter how the world twisted or turned, blood would remain thicker than ambition, pride, or envy. But I was wrong. And it began in the smallest, quietest ways, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. But I was paying attention. Too much, maybe. My name is Ayan. I'm 29, soft-spoken, calculated, and always the kind of person who believed hard work would speak louder than loud mouths. I had dedicated 8 years of my life to my uncle's business, a multi-branch furniture and design company that he started from the ground up. I wasn't just another employee. I was the one who stayed late, handled crisis calls at midnight, brought in clients, modernized the branding, all of it. We were sitting in his old wood-paneled office when I first felt it. It was just a glance. A fleeting moment. My uncle, sipping his black tea, looked up from a folder and glanced past me toward the hallway, where Rayhan, my cousin, had just walked by. There was something different in that glance. Pride? Admiration? I couldn't tell. But it wasn't just casual family fondness. It was assessment, like he was sizing Rayhan up for something important. I brushed it off. That weekend, at our family get-together, a biannual barbecue my aunt hosted, I noticed it again. Everyone kept complimenting Rayhan. Mashallah, Rayhan, you've grown into such a leader. Rayhan Beta, you always had the business sense in your blood. I was used to being the golden one when it came to business talks. Now, I was just, oh yes, Ayan's always dependable. Dependable. That's how you describe a car that always starts, not someone you trust with the future of your legacy. But it was probably just my ego, right? I convinced myself I was overthinking. Rayhan had just returned from Dubai after 3 years, trying to get his own startup off the ground. It had flopped. He came back home, needing stability. My uncle, ever the generous man, probably just wanted to lift him up. One afternoon, I stopped by the office to drop off a client file. The receptionist, Sana, looked surprised to see me. Oh, I thought you were working remotely this week. I blinked. Why would I be? Didn't Mr. Kareem tell you? She asked, tilting her head. He said you were giving your cousin a bit of space to get familiar with things, like an informal transition. Transition? That word echoed in my mind like a slow drip in a silent room. I laughed it off, barely, and walked away, heart pounding. In the hallway, I saw Rayhan in my office. My chair. My desk. He had his sleeves rolled up and was laughing on a call, feet propped on my cabinet. A framed photo of me and my father, now passed, was sitting on the floor, leaning against the bookshelf. That's when I knew. Something had changed. But I still didn't confront anyone. Not yet. Maybe it was a miscommunication. Maybe Sana misunderstood. I wasn't about to throw accusations around based on an offhand comment and a desk being borrowed. Later that week, I tried bringing it up lightly to my uncle. We were having lunch at our usual spot, the roadside dhaba near the workshop. Rayhan's settling in well, I said, stirring my chai. He nodded. He's got fire. That raw energy. Reminds me of myself at his age. I forced a smile. Any particular reason he's been working out of my office lately? My uncle waved his hand. Temporary. He needed space to get his bearings. Don't overthink it. Overthink it. He said it with such ease. But there it was again, that glance. That pause. That something he wasn't saying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. Thoughts looping like a broken record. Was I paranoid? Or was I being slowly, silently replaced? My phone buzzed at 1:12 a.m. A message from Rayhan. Hey, hope you're cool with me shifting some of your stuff around. Uncle said I could use your office for now. Shouldn't be long. Thanks, bro. Folded hands, medium light skin tone. There it was. Confirmation. And the casual bro, at the end, salt in the wound. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at the message until my screen dimmed and went black. The next day, I walked into the office unannounced. Rayhan wasn't there. But my desk had been cleared out. Only the client binders remained. My files were gone. My laptop was replaced. Even the coffee mug my sister had gifted me, the one with #OneNephew, had been tucked away on a side shelf. No one said a word. Not a single person asked me if I was okay. Not even my uncle. I stood in the doorway, watching Rayhan's flashy new laptop blink to life, and I thought, this isn't temporary. This is a takeover. But still I told myself, wait. Don't react. Don't make a scene. That was the last day. I played nice. The following week was a blur of awkward silences, half smiles, and passive-aggressive updates. Rayhan had settled in like a king returning to his rightful throne. My uncle, Mr. Kareem, the man who once called me his right hand, now barely acknowledged me during meetings. He used to introduce me to clients as the brains behind the operations. Now I was just Ayan, he'll assist if needed. I told myself I needed clarity, not conclusions. So I started observing. Quietly. Intently. It started with the team. People who once came to me for sign-offs, suggestions, and crisis handling now tiptoed past me like I was the janitor. I noticed things on the whiteboards being erased, client strategies I had worked weeks on. New labels with Rayhan's name under lead. I didn't even know some of these projects were in motion. One afternoon, I overheard a hushed conversation between Rayhan and Zara, our lead designer. Zara said, "But won't Ayan feel blindsided?" Rayhan chuckled. He had a good run. But this isn't about feelings anymore. It's about what the company needs. There was a pause. Then footsteps. I ducked into the copy room, heart pounding in my chest. What the company needs. Something shifted in me that day. The benefit of the doubt evaporated. I began looking at everything through a new lens, a darker, colder one. In the following days, the signs became impossible to ignore. Emails stopped reaching me. I was left out of meeting invites. Projects I initiated were reassigned, with Rayhan's name stamped at the top. My uncle avoided one-on-one conversations, always in a rush or on another call. The cherry on top? A company newsletter. Rayhan's photo plastered at the top. Headline: A new vision. Rayhan steps into leadership role to elevate Kareem Interiors. My name wasn't even mentioned. I remember sitting in the car that night, hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine running, but I wasn't going anywhere. My chest felt hollow. Not from the loss of position, but the betrayal, the silence, the dismissal. It wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Still, I needed answers. Proof. Not just whispers in corridors. So I started digging. I stayed late one evening. Everyone had left, or so I thought. Rayhan's laptop was still on. Not locked. I hesitated for a moment. My conscience whispered, "Don't." But my soul was screaming, "You need to know." I opened his email. Search. Transition plan. There it was. An internal document labeled Phase Strategy. Management shift drafted 2 months ago, while I was still presenting reports, thinking I was being groomed for expansion. The document broke down how to gradually phase me out. A week 1 to 2. Reassign responsibilities. Frame as shared workload. Week 3. Move Rayhan into Ayan's office for logistical ease. A week 4. Public-facing announcement Rayhan's leadership. A week 5. Reevaluate Ayan's relevance. Possible relocation or offer to resign. I stared at the screen, mouth dry. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. And at the bottom of the doc, a comment from my uncle. Let's ensure it feels organic. No friction. Ayan deserves respect, even if we're changing direction. Respect? That word tasted like poison now. I closed the laptop and stepped back. I wanted to scream, to break something. But instead, I stood in that office alone, under the dim flicker of fluorescent lights, and I felt something colder than rage, clarity. They had planned this. All the smiles, all the delayed meetings, all the "don't worry, it's temporary." It was all rehearsed. A carefully choreographed betrayal. But I wasn't going to crumble. I began keeping records. I forwarded emails to a private folder. I started documenting who said what, when, and where. If they were building a case to erase me, I'd build a case they couldn't ignore. At home, I barely ate. My sister, Alina, noticed. "You look hollow," she said one night, placing a hand on my shoulder. Like you're here, but not really. I smiled faintly. Just office stuff. But how could I tell her that the very people I trusted, who called me son, were engineering my erasure? Then came the final straw. At the next board meeting, one I wasn't initially invited to, but insisted on attending, Rayhan presented a 5-year growth plan. A plan that looked eerily familiar. Slide by slide, I watched as my original ideas, strategies I had pitched months ago, were presented as his. Repackaged, renamed, polished. My uncle clapped proudly. This is the energy we need. No one looked at me. When the lights came back on, I leaned in and said, You know most of those models were mine, right? Rayhan just smiled. We're all building on each other's ideas, bro. That word again. Bro. I stood, nodded, and walked out. But I didn't go home. I went back to the office. Alone again. I sat in the dark, the room humming with quiet betrayal. And I decided, they may have replaced me, but they will remember me. It was a Thursday when everything finally snapped into place. The office was unusually quiet, a foggy morning where time felt suspended. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, pretending to work while watching the small glass meeting room at the end of the corridor. Rayhan was inside, laughing with 2 men in suits I didn't recognize. I zoomed in on the name tags from a distance. They were from an architectural firm we had been in talks with months ago, talks I had initiated. Only now I wasn't in the room. That was the final confirmation. It wasn't just that they had taken my title, my credit, and my voice in the company. They had taken my future and gifted it to someone who'd done nothing but step in with the right bloodline. The next hour moved like clockwork. Maybe it was instinct, maybe desperation. But I knew what I had to do. I went into the archive room. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the drawer marked Confidential, Strategic Proposals. It was there. The original master proposal I had crafted 6 months ago, full of my personal notes, hand-drawn diagrams, and margin sketches in blue ink. And attached to it, my signed timestamp, complete with an internal memo forwarding it to Mr. Karim. Undeniable proof. I took photos, page by page. But that wasn't the moment everything changed. That came an hour later, when I returned to my desk and found my email locked out. Screen flashing. Access restricted. Contact admin. Panic rose in my throat. I ran to Zara. Are the servers down? She blinked. No. Mine's fine. I nodded, throat dry. Thanks. I didn't go to IT. I already knew. They were starting the final phase. Week 5. Evaluate Ion's relevance. I paced into the hallway, trying to steady my breath. That's when I heard the voices from the adjacent conference room, the door slightly ajar. We'll say he's voluntarily stepping back, Rayhan was saying. Make it seem like a sabbatical, not a removal. Mr. Karim replied, he's not a threat. He's loyal, he won't fight back. And then something that made my blood turn to ice. Rayhan laughed. Exactly. That's what makes it so easy. I froze. The room tilted, sounds warping around me. I stumbled back, 1 step, 2, into the kitchenette, heart hammering against my ribs like a war drum. They didn't just want to replace me. They wanted to erase me, gently, quietly, and make it seem like I chose to leave. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart beating a funeral rhythm for everything I had built. I remembered the late nights in the office, the way I used to come home glowing with purpose, how I believed loyalty meant something, that if you gave your all, people would protect you. I was wrong. The next morning, I walked into the office before sunrise, and I waited. When Rayhan entered at 9:03 a.m., carrying his new leather briefcase, I was seated in my old office. He blinked. You need something? I gestured for him to sit. Just a minute. He hesitated, then walked in, half smiling. You okay, bro? I pulled out a folder and placed it on the desk between us. This is the original draft of the Karim Expansion Initiative, the one you presented as your own. I slid over the printed pages, including the time-stamped memo and a printed copy of the email chain forwarding it to our uncle. His face darkened. "Where did you? You left the filing cabinet unlocked. Rookie move." My tone was flat, surgical. He picked up the pages, flipping through them slowly. His silence was a theater of guilt. "I could forward this to the board," I said calmly. "Or to a journalist. Or post it anonymously. It would take your shiny new title and bury it in the mud." Rayhan met my eyes. Something flickered, rage, fear, maybe both. "You're bluffing." "I'm not." A long pause. Then he smirked. "What do you want?" That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't want his apology. That would be cheap. I didn't want my old job back. That version of me was dead. I wanted power, or at least the truth to weigh equally on both sides. I leaned forward. "I want you to go to the board and tell them the proposal was mine. I want you to step down publicly. You can say you need time off, I don't care how you frame it. But you tell the truth." Rayhan laughed bitterly. "And if I don't?" I smiled. "Then I go nuclear. And let the truth burn this whole foundation you're so proud of." He stood, nostrils flaring, fists clenched. But he didn't argue. He just left. Later that day, an emergency board meeting was called. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. At 5:45 p.m., Mr. Karim called me into his office. His eyes were tired, disappointed, but not at me. "I wish you had come to me first." I raised an eyebrow. "Would it have made a difference?" He looked away. "We'll issue a joint statement," he said. Rayhan stepping away to focus on personal matters. "And the proposal? You'll be credited. Publicly." A pause. Then he added, "I'm sorry, Ayan." I didn't reply. Because the thing about betrayal is, once it's cracked the surface, no amount of apologies can mend the foundation underneath. That night, as I walked out of the office, wind brushing against my face like a whispered warning, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, but aware, awake, reborn. The following days unfolded like scenes from a dream I didn't quite trust. The office buzzed with whispered rumors. "Rayhan's on leave," they said. "Personal reasons." But I saw it in their eyes, curiosity, confusion, and just a touch of fear. Because the truth, no matter how carefully wrapped, always left a strange scent in the air. People looked at me differently now. Some with respect, others with wariness, like they weren't sure if I was a hero or just someone they shouldn't cross. I wasn't sure either, but Rayhan's absence wasn't enough. Not for me, because I still didn't understand why he did it. Not really. Not fully. So, when he messaged me 4 days later, "Let's talk. Just us." I agreed. We met at an old tea house tucked away behind the city's oldest mosque. A quiet place, heavy with the scent of cardamom and thyme. He was already there, sitting in the farthest booth, dressed in black like he was attending a funeral. Maybe he was. I sat down across from him, my face unreadable. "Say what you need to say." He looked at me for a long moment. Then finally, "You weren't supposed to fight back." I raised an eyebrow. "That's your apology?" "It's not," he said. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't want what you had. I did. But I didn't plan it all alone." There it was. The first crack in the illusion. "You're saying Karim wasn't on it?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Just sipped his tea, eyes distant. "They thought you'd never push. You were always the quiet one. The loyal one." "I was loyal," I said, voice sharp. "To the work. To the vision. Not to the backroom deals and family politics." Rayhan leaned forward. "You know why they wanted me? Because I could play their game. You never could. You actually believed in merit." The words stung. Because they were true. "I worked for everything I had," I said slowly. "And you? You just walked in and wore it like a borrowed suit." Rayhan chuckled bitterly. "And it never fit right, did it?" I stayed silent. Then he said something I hadn't expected. Something that changed everything. "Karim never planned for you to stay long-term." I looked up. "What?" "He always said you were the builder. The architect. But not the face. Not the legacy. I sat back, stunned. So, I was just a placeholder? You were the foundation. But foundations don't get glory. They just hold up the house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything inside me burned. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Rayhan shrugged. Because I'm out. And you're in. But don't think for a second you're safe. He's already looking for the next replacement. There it was. The real twist. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. A pattern. A cycle. I wasn't the first.
And I wouldn't be the last.
Suddenly, everything shifted. Rayhan wasn't the only villain in this story. He was just the most obvious one. Why'd you go along with it? I whispered, my voice trembling. Because I was tired of being second, he said. Tired of people acting like I didn't belong. I wanted to prove I could win. I stared at him, pain bubbling under my skin. You didn't win. You sold your soul for borrowed power. And you, he asked. What are you going to do now? Keep playing this game? Or burn it down? I didn't answer. Not then. Because the truth was I didn't know. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, city lights blinking like distant stars. The conversation replayed in my head, over and over. I remembered how Kareem used to call me his sharpest sword. And now I realized, he only unsheathed me when there was a war to fight. And once it was won, he'd place me back in the scabbard, forgotten. But not this time. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom uninvited. Kareem was there, along with the senior partners. They all turned, startled. I want a seat, I said. Kareem's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heard me. Not just a title. A voice. A vote. One of the board members scoffed. You don't have the equity. I pulled out a folder. This one thinner, but sharper. I've drafted a full audit of our past 6 projects. And in each one, you'll see exactly whose strategy led to which profit margin. If I go public with this, your legacy firm loses credibility overnight. Kareem's jaw clenched. Is that a threat? No, I said. It's a fact. Silence. Then, surprisingly, one of the older board members nodded slowly. Let's discuss. Kareem looked like he wanted to protest, but something in my eyes stopped him. That was the moment the power shifted. Not because I stole it, but because I took it back. Later that day, I received an email confirming my new role, head of strategic development. Voting rights included. Not a partner. Not yet. But no longer invisible. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt cold. Because the higher you climb, the more masks you see. That evening, I found a note on my desk. No name. Just a line scribbled in Rayhan's handwriting. They only smile when they sharpen their knives. I stared at it for a long time. And then I smiled too. Because now I had my own. The ink hadn't dried on my new office plaque before I realized nothing really changes at the top. It just gets quieter. More dangerous. More polite. The congratulations were brief. Measured. Almost like everyone had been instructed to smile, but not too wide. Clap, but only once. The message was clear. You've arrived, but you're not welcome.
And Kareem?
He hadn't said a word since the board meeting. No handshake. No meeting invite. Just silence, so loud it pressed on my chest like a weight. But that wasn't the part that shook me. It was how quickly I adapted.
I learned to talk like them.
Move like them. Smile with my mouth while keeping my thoughts chained behind my teeth. And I started seeing the cracks. The hidden handshakes. The ghost deals made outside the meeting room. The names that were never written down, but always understood. I began tracing them like a detective. Every email Rayhan had sent while he was in my chair. Every folder he'd forwarded to Kareem. Every project that accidentally tanked just before a competitor swooped in. There was a pattern. And at the center of it, my cousin. Not just a puppet. Not just a traitor. But a scapegoat. He wasn't the mastermind. He was the offering. A distraction to keep my eyes off the real monster. Kareem had set him up to take the fall the moment things got hot. And now I had the receipts. But here's the twist no one prepares you for. When you finally hold the sword of justice, it feels heavier than you imagined. Because vengeance isn't clean. It's messy. It stains. I could have leaked everything. Sent those files to the press. Brought the whole structure crashing down. But I didn't. Instead, I requested a meeting. With Kareem. Just the two of us. He accepted. We met in the same office where he once told me I wasn't ready. Where he laughed when I presented a proposal that now earned the firm its biggest client. He sat across from me, hands folded.
Calm. Smug. So.
You're here, he said. I am. He waited, but I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch until it itched beneath his collar. You used Rayhan, I said finally. He thought he was playing you, but you used him to keep me distracted. Kareem smirked. You needed pressure to grow. Now you're sharper than ever. This isn't mentorship, I snapped. This is manipulation. You played with lives. He shrugged. Business isn't personal. It's survival. I leaned forward, voice like ice. Then let me survive like this. Either you hand over your majority stake quietly, or I file an anonymous report to the regulators with all the files I've gathered. And, trust me, they'll listen. For the first time, his mask slipped. You're bluffing. I smiled. You're welcome to test that. The silence that followed was thick, electric. Finally, he spoke. You've changed. No, I said. You just never saw me clearly. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, with a slow exhale, he reached into his drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it toward me. Sign this, he said. You'll have what you want. I looked inside. A contract offering me 15% additional stake. Enough to make my voice dominant in most decisions. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to reshape the firm. Enough to protect others like me who came in through the back door, climbed through the shadows, and were told to be grateful for the scraps. I signed. Not because I trusted him, but because this was my game now. As I walked out of his office, the air felt different. Crisper. Like something had been lifted, but not entirely. That night, I sat on the rooftop of my apartment, watching the city hum below. The breeze carried scents of roasting corn and rain-soaked pavement. I thought of Rayhan. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. Some said he left the country. Others whispered he was working with a rival firm. I didn't care. Or at least I told myself I didn't. Until I found the envelope. No stamp. Just tucked under my office door. Inside was a single photo. Me and Rayhan. A childhood shot.
Him holding a toy airplane.
Me looking up at him, laughing. And scribbled on the back in his handwriting. It wasn't all a lie. For the first time in a long time, I felt something crack in my chest. Was it guilt? Grief? Or just the bitter ache of realizing that even when you win, you lose pieces of yourself along the way? I placed the photo on my desk. A reminder. Not of what was taken from me, but of what I was still capable of losing. Weeks passed. I changed policies. Created mentorship programs. Started quietly reshaping the culture from within. People noticed. Some applauded. Others planned. Because in this world, elevation comes with exposure. You rise high enough, and every shadow wants to reach you. Then one evening, I found something strange. A new file on my private drive. No name. No metadata. Just a title. The next one. Inside was a dossier. A promising young associate. Brilliant. Ambitious. Quiet. Like I once was. And a note attached. Keep them close. Or replace them first. No signature. No trace. But I knew where it came from. Kareem's last lesson. A test. Or a threat. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then slowly I deleted the file. Because I knew something now. You don't break the cycle by becoming the next master. You break it by refusing the throne altogether. But I also knew someone else would take it. And maybe one day, I'd have to stop them too. Just as I turned off the lights in my office, I paused. Because in the reflection of the glass behind me, I saw someone standing at the end of the hall. Watching. Still. Silent. Smiling. And in that moment, I realized the game was never really over, it had only just begun.